Good evening. Welcome to Dinner with the Doctor. It's the middle of summer already, amazingly, and we have some really good food for us this evening. Stacy Gusky, one of our premier people here at Village, is here with us this evening, and she has a power salad.
Exactly.
And before we get to that, I do want to remind you about the Village Vitality Challenge. If you're not aware of that, you can find it on Facebook. If you go to Facebook, just search for Village Vitality Challenge, and you should be able to find the group. Or you can go to villagesda.org and find a link there. And we'll also try to throw a link down in the description of the YouTube video where you may be watching this. And our topic this evening after this is sunshine, which correlates with our challenge for the month. And if you want more information, go find it. It's kind of fun when we can correlate our monthly challenge with our Dinner with the Doctor talk and our Sunday support talk on the first Sunday of every month. So with that, I'll turn it over to Stacy. And it looks like we have a lot of good stuff going on here. So tell us what's for dinner.
Okay, well, we have our power salad today, and for those that know me, I make up most of my own recipes. I really don't follow a cookbook. So when people ask me, hey, can you share that recipe, they get a little bit of, well, it looks like this amount, and it looks like this amount, but I really go by taste. This recipe came about because on one Sabbath, I was not planning on attending potluck, and about an hour before we had to leave the house, I was told we were leaving and going to potluck after our church service, and I had nothing to prepare. So I quickly was able to throw this together while I'm flipping pancakes for breakfast. It was a very hectic morning, but we made it out the door on time, and it was a very healthy, nutritious dish to serve not only as a one plate or one bowl dinner, but everybody that tasted it said it was really good. So I thought I'd share that with you this evening. I did utilize my Instapots, and that's the only way that I was able to cook pancakes and make this power salad at the same time. So if you don't have an Instapot, this will be a fast, quick lesson on how to use them. If you do, I might sound like an infomercial, and for that, I'm sorry. So first of all, you need to get your rice and your lentils going. Again, the recipe is either in front of you or it will be on the link below the video. So rice and lentils are both a 2-to-1 ratio, which means for every cup you put in of rice or lentils, you're going to put in 2 cups of water. And in the Instapot, this makes it super easy. So I have 4 cups here. So I'm going to put 2 cups in this Instapot. And when it comes to cooking things like rice, lentils, you do have to measure. So let me clarify my measuring statement at that point. So I have my 2 cups of water in the Instapot, and I'm going to measure out a cup of rice. I will say I joined the Instapot revolution late. It was really very popular during the pandemic. I'm not sure why, because more people had time to do slow cooking, but it really did become popular then, and I didn't join the bandwagon because I didn't want to buy another tool for my kitchen. If you've ever been in my home, you will see that I have every nook and cranny stuffed with every type of tool possible. So with the Instapot, it's super easy. I put my water in, I put my rice in, and now I'm just going to put the lid on, and there's a button that says rice. I'm putting that on, I'm turning off keep warm, and it's going to pressurize for about 5-6 minutes, and then there will be a 12-minute cook cycle, and then it will beep at me, and it will be done, and I will have nothing else to do with it except opening it up when it's done. With the lentils, again, I've already got my 2 cups in there, and now I'm putting in my 1 cup of lentils. Now, lentils, there is not a nifty button on the Instapot for these. I actually had to look it up. And it's 7 minutes, so a total of 10 minutes, 3 for pressurizing, 7 to cook, and your lentils are done. For this recipe, I am using brown lentils. And lentils are extremely high in protein. They have 18 grams of protein in a cup serving. They are full of folate, iron, potassium, magnesium, and they are a great source of fiber. In fact, I was just doing some research on fiber and lentils and their impact on type 2 diabetes, and I found that lentils have the same effect on blood sugar as a legume, a bean. So if you were to eat a half a cup of lentils at the end of your meal, it brings your blood sugar down from your meal and has a positive impact on that. So that's something, if you struggle with blood sugar issues, that's something you're going to want to remember, is to have some lentils or beans and help bring that blood sugar back down. Brown rice is full of manganese and selenium and magnesium, phosphorus, and a lot of B vitamins. And you want to eat brown rice. You don't want to eat white rice. You need that outer covering of fiber. And there's a saying out there, perhaps you've heard it, the whiter the bread, the quicker you're dead. That goes along for the rice too. You don't want to eat white bread, you don't want to eat white rice, because the nutritious part, that shell, has already been removed. And you need that for your body, you need that for the vitamins. It slows down the digestion, it keeps the blood sugar from having this huge influx of sugar into it. So that's going to be really important for anybody watching their sugar intake. All right, moving on. The next longest item for our power salad is our onion. Now, when I started making the recipe for that Sabbath, I was thinking I was going to do a mejadra. And then I decided, well, my husband really doesn't like a mejadra. But I already had my onions cooking, and a lot of people don't like raw onions, so I continue to just let them cook. My inclination would have been to put a red onion in, because in a salad, you usually use a red onion. But for this recipe, I caramelized a sweet onion. And you can caramelize onions many different ways. If you put them in a slow cooker overnight, they can caramelize without any added fats. Normally, you need a fat to help caramelize it. You could try braising. I have. It doesn't usually get that nice golden color because it doesn't pull out the sugars as much. But you really need to be careful of what fats you use. So any fats today that I use, I'm going to be using extra virgin olive oil. It's one of the healthier fats for you. So to caramelize the onion, I'm just cutting very small, thin strips of onion in a half moon shape. And I'm only going to use half an onion because this is going to be for a recipe for 4 people. And unless you really, really like caramelized onion, which I do, you really don't need a whole onion. And I still don't need a whole onion. So I'm going to put that in. I'm going to use a tiny, tiny, tiny drop of olive oil because I want it to have that little nice crisp on it. And I do mean, I literally put in 1/8 of a teaspoon. So the rest of it, I'm going to be using water. Making sure my Instapots are cooking, they are going, and I'm putting water in. The difference between sauteing and braising is the medium. Sauteing, you're using a butter or an oil. Braising, you're using water. So we're gonna get this going. It's on high. I'm using a heat-proof silicone spatula. For those of you that don't know, if your spatula is colored, it usually means it's heat safe. If it's not colored, if it's just white, you can't use it in the heat. So that's going to go. And while this is cooking and while the rice and the lentils are going, I can chop my vegetables for the salad. I can prep another dish to go with the salad if I want to. So it really takes away, the main ingredients really are off to the side and I don't have to pay attention to them. So I'm going to cut up some zucchini. Again, for 4 people, I don't need such a big zucchini. I was not able to get into my garden in the last couple of days, and as a result, we have mammoth zucchinis. So you just want to cut them up as bite-sized pieces. When I'm serving this to a small group, I would make it as a buffet, and when you go to get your food tonight, you'll see it is set up as a buffet. However, if I'm serving it to a large group of people in a potluck, I would pre-assemble because it's just faster getting people to go through line. So I've cut up a partial zucchini. I'm going to put in some tomato. Cherry tomatoes, I just cut them in half. I being a mom, I worry about a whole cherry tomato in there because some people like whole cherry tomatoes, but I worry about choking. So I try to cut them in half. If you've ever had to shove your fingers down one of your kids' mouths to flip something because it's stuck the wrong way, you can understand. As a teacher, I had a student that couldn't eat cheesy fries without choking. And in the time I taught him, performed Heimlich 3 times. All right, now we've got a cucumber. Cucumbers are so nice in this hot weather. They really help restore electrolytes. They're very low in calorie, as are all vegetables. But it's that electrolyte balance that you really want in the hot sun. Often I'll go out to the garden when my husband and I are working and find him eating one of our cucumbers as an electrolyte bringer. Then we've got some sweet peppers. Again, you'll see I'm using lots of color in this salad. As a plant-based diet, you want to make sure you're eating a rainbow because those rainbows represent nutrients that are in each item that you're putting in your body. Different sources, different amounts of vitamin C are all dependent on the colors in the peppers. All right, let's see, what else am I putting in here? Walnuts. I want some crunch. Now, a lot of people will just put croutons on their salads, and that's okay, but most croutons are made with white bread, with vegetable or canola oil, not extra virgin olive oil. They're high in sodium, so you really have to be careful what crunchies you put in. If I'm going to put a crunchy in, I'd rather be able to get other minerals from it, so I'll use a nut, sometimes an almond, a lot of times a walnut. And you just have to be careful that you're not taking in too many nuts because they do have a higher fat content. And I'm just going to chop those up. We blew a fuse. For dinner tonight, I did pre-make the lentils and the rice, so we're going to let those just stop so that we can have the onions braising. So just a quick chop on those. If you notice, I'm making everything bite-sized pieces. And it looks like it's time for, olives. I would normally put olives in here. I use the Lindsay undyed. They're called a natural black olive because I don't want that extra dye in my body. It's not natural. It's full of sodium. By taking that out, you're removing one extra chemical that you really don't need. And I find they taste better. They have a little nuttier flavor. And the dye, I don't like the taste of the dye. So far we have lots of color in here. Notice I left the skin on the zucchini, but I did peel the cucumbers. Sometimes the peel on a regular cucumber upsets stomachs, and I didn't have an English cucumber, which would not need to be peeled. So that's why that one's peeled. The zucchini skin has lots of nutrients in it, so if you can tolerate it, you're going to want to eat the skins on as many vegetables as you can. All right, so we're waiting for our onions. We have rice and lentils that are pre-made over here, but I tell you, 7 minutes on the lentil, and it's a perfect lentil out of that Instapot. 12 minutes on the rice, again, you have perfect brown rice. We're going to make our salad dressing. So our salad dressing is a cup of olive oil, and this will make salad dressing that will last you a week. So if you want to cut down, just divide everything in half or even in a quarter. So we have a cup of olive oil. We're going to do a cup of lemon juice. And then everything else in the recipe is mainly a teaspoon. So we have, this is Old Bay. Old Bay has a great combination of seasonings in it, but it can be high in salt, so you'll notice that everything else doesn't have salt in it. I didn't put salt in with my lentils. I didn't put salt in with my rice. Too much salt is not good for you, but also you have to have salt because too little upsets your your heart rhythm. especially if you're sweating a lot for the day. That's why those sports drinks can't come out, and they say that, like Gatorade is great, but if you get plain Gatorade, it's high in sugar and high in salt. So you just have to be very careful with how much you're intaking. We've got smoked paprika. What I just put in was garlic. Now we've got the smoked paprika. It's very different than a regular paprika. So if you're doing a Hungarian dish or a Polish dish and it calls for paprika, you don't want the smoked paprika. You actually will want Hungarian paprika. So that was onion powder. You may notice that I'm really not using powder. I'm using granulated. I like the flavor of the granulated better. It doesn't matter which one you use in your home. So we have oregano here. Then I have 2 tablespoons of minced garlic. And again, as I said, I estimate. Even the teaspoon, this is actually half a teaspoon, but I rounded it up. So I cook by taste. Honey, it's supposed to be our 2 tablespoons. Again, I'm going to err on the side of caution. 1, 2, and you whip it together. You always want to sample if you're not cooking with exact measurements, and probably even if you are, you always want to taste something before you serve it to somebody else. I was trying out new ways of making a vegan loaf the other day, and I passed a sample to my eldest son, and he goes, "Has great flavor. Can we call it stuffing loaf?" He says it tastes just like Thanksgiving stuffing. And I said, well, I can't serve it at dinner with the doctor because then it needs mashed potatoes and gravy. And he's like, this is true. So we decided not to do stuffing gravy, but it may end up on our table on a later date. While we're waiting for the onions, and they're almost done. Now, I know a lot of people that don't really know how to tell when an onion is fully cooked. If you're braising, the water is gone, and then the onion has a little golden color. The onion should not have any crunch to it to be fully cooked. In fact, I used to cook for elementary school hot lunches all the time, and the students swore they never ate an onion, and I put onion in everything. So if it's cooked right, they don't know what's there. You can blend it, you can chop it super fine, you can hide it in things, and people will never know it's there because they won't be able to see it, but they'll know if it's missing. That's the big key. All right, so we also have a dessert for this meal. We have coconut chia pudding, and that recipe is on the back of your recipe card. It's right here, and there are many different ways of making this chia pudding. A lot of people will put a sweetener in it. I don't. I try to let my fruit be my sweetener, and it's very simple. Chia, if you have never used chia, now some of you may be thinking of chia pet. If you're over 40, you know that theme song. And I remember having chia pets advertised on TV, and you'd get this black seed, and you'd mix it with water, and you'd paint it on a terracotta structure, and it would grow sprouts. And then you could use those sprouts in your salads or on a sandwich. Chia sprouts are very tasty, and they're very nutritious. But we never started using them until the past 10 years. And chia is a great substitute for egg. It's a wonderful binder and thickener. And if you haven't tried it, you really should. I put it in my granola when I make granola. I put it in water and use it in breads if I need an egg base of some kind. And it works wonderfully. But you're also getting extra fiber from the chia, and you're getting those little bits of nutrients. And it really helps the digestive system to have those seeds in there. If you've been told by your doctor that you need to avoid things with small seeds because they don't get broken down, then you should also consult your doctor about the chia seeds before you try to use them. All right, let's read through the recipe. 4 tablespoons of chia seeds, a cup of coconut milk, light variety. The light variety, let me see if I have that option up here. This is the light coconut milk. Today we are just using what's called coconut cream, and there's nothing else added to it. It just has more of the fat in it. When I made this recipe for the group, I used a combination because the coconut light was, for some reason, really, really thin, and it was a lot thinner than I was used to. So for this demonstration, I'm using coconut cream. I'm going to use 1 cup, and you're going to get to watch this just thicken up before your eyes. And then we're going to use 4 tablespoons of the chia seeds, and this is for a serving of 2 people. That's 2. That's 4. I'm just going to stir it up, and we're going to set it aside. If you wanted to, you could add a dash of vanilla. If you wanted to sweeten it, you could put in some coconut sugar, or you could put in a little tiny bit of honey. But again, I think the fruit on it is sweet enough. Okay, we're still cooking, which is great. All right, and that's just going to thicken up. So we have our lentils, our rice. On our salad, we're going to use romaine lettuce. You can also use a butter lettuce. I don't recommend head lettuce. Head lettuce doesn't have a whole lot of nutrients in it. So we're just going to chop it up. It'll go on the plate. And as I said, I have some pre-made lentils and rice put together. Now, fortunately, when I was making this, we had several hours before it was going to be served. So when I took the hot lentils and rice out, I threw them in a pan, and I brought them to church and threw them in the fridge. You want these items cold when they go on the salad. This is not a hot salad. So I have brown rice and lentils going on. You don't have to use a cup. You can use whatever you think is enough for you. And then we're going to put on our veggie toppings. We're going to, again, whip up our salad dressing again. If you use a blender, it stays emulsified a little bit longer, and it really makes that lemon juice blend with the olive oil. Again, we're just drizzling. You don't need to have your salad swimming. It's just to add flavor because you don't have seasonings and anything else except that dressing, so those vegetable flavors are really going to pop out. And then you have your lovely meal, which I would serve with a slice of whole wheat pita bread. And actually, 1 slice is a lot. You can see they're quite big, and this salad is extremely filling. So I would recommend serving your family a quarter at a time, and then you would have your dinner. Do we have any questions? These onions are going to keep going because we had that little power outage. I'm not sure how long they were out, but we'll just let them go for a little bit longer. Do we have any questions? Other than that, what was that, Dr. Kelly? You can take it home with you, or you can eat it here. That's totally your option. Done.
All right, thank you for sharing. This is fabulous, and you guys watching from home don't know what you're missing out on. Anyway, I think we're going to take a little intermission now and get set up for our lecture. We'll be right back. welcome back. And here with us this evening, we have a good friend of mine and a classmate from medical school, Dr. John Kelly. And you're here to talk to us about sunlight.
Sunlight, yes.
So, welcome.
Thank you.
And
Glad to be here.
I don't think Dr. Kelly really needs any more introduction than that. I'm looking forward to hearing what he has to share with us this evening.
Thank you very much. Yeah, I enjoy being with you, and boy, we sure just saw a beautiful meal put together. So tonight, I'm going to be talking with you about sunlight, and it's amazing what we just saw Stacy Gusky prepare in a way of a meal would have been impossible without sunlight. So there is a sort of a connection here. Let me make sure my pointer's working. So, you probably heard sunshine called nature's vitamin D. I don't remember when I first heard it, but it was a curiosity to me until I began to study medicine and learn more about the human physiology. Do you know that human beings are actually designed to spend some time in sunlight most, if not every day of the year? That's right. We need regular, moderate exercise, but we also need that ideally to be outdoors and in the sunlight. And it takes a minimum amount, and we'll talk about that here in the talk. It takes a minimum amount of sun exposure, sunlight, each day to have optimal health. And it can be hard to achieve in our modern world with the air-conditioned offices and homes. I mean, I'm enjoying air conditioning, don't get me wrong here, but one of the detriments is it makes you not want to be outdoors. You have to acclimate to the climate that you find yourself in. I know when I was working in the Marshall Islands, beautiful place, especially the ocean there, but oh my goodness, it took me some time to acclimate to that humidity. So, but regardless of how challenging it can be, actually it's good to exercise in the morning. I would say that's even a better time than in midday when it's hottest. So it works out okay. Now, one of the most beneficial things about sunlight, from a medical standpoint at least, is how it consumes the molecular precursors used to make cholesterol. And instead, those precursors are used to make vitamin D. And it's interesting, of course, in an ideal world, we wouldn't have to worry about having our body making cholesterol because it would make the appropriate amount that we would need. Our body does need some cholesterol to be healthy. But in our modern world, we're getting way too much. And excess cholesterol, especially if it's exogenous, we consume it, it tends to be oxidized cholesterol. And the oxidized LDL cholesterol is some of the most active part of causing atherosclerosis, injuries to the walls of our blood vessels. But you know, sunlight not only increases our vitamin D levels, so it also then reduces our production of excess cholesterol. I don't know how many different people I've talked to over the years in lifestyle medicine and talked to them about how their statin or their cholesterol medications work. It's amazingly few people who really fully understand what the medicines they're taking are doing and how they work. But once they realize that it's actually preventing their liver from making cholesterol, and then I asked them, so does it make sense to put your liver at risk while you're eating cholesterol without any second thoughts about it? And most people realize immediately, well, that doesn't make a lot of sense. If your cholesterol is a little too high, perhaps you should cut back on your consumption of cholesterol. And of course, the only place it's found, cholesterol is found only in animal foods. Plants don't have or make cholesterol. So it's a great 2-for-1, not just a single benefit of having vitamin D, but also helping to lower cholesterol intake. Well, not sure what I did wrong here, but it doesn't seem to be. My pointer's not working there for a minute. Let's try it. It's my problem, guys, not the technicians. All right. So, let's see what the deal is. Well, let's go back and get this going. Not sure exactly what I did wrong, but we're going to catch the machine back up here. Okay, so one of the big questions that we run into frequently with sunshine or sunlight exposure is, what about causing skin cancer? Isn't that a big problem? And actually, many people today are fearful of getting sunlight or sunshine because they're afraid of having cancer, skin cancer. And it's interesting because studies looking at sun exposure and reveal that workers who spend their entire working day basically outdoors in the sunshine do not have increased skin cancer occurrence. So this is, but there's a key here. So stick with me. It actually, and in fact, the studies indicate that many actually have less skin cancer than those folks who try to avoid the sun. And then, of course, when we do get sunlight, we have a tendency to get what? To get sunburned. And it's actually the sunburning that is more the cause of the skin cancer risk than it is the sunlight itself. And so our bodies actually have a built-in protective mechanism so that we don't have to worry so much about sun exposure being harmful if we're getting regular sunlight exposure. So that the way and we're talking here about the north and south. At the equator, this is a little different. In the equator, the sunlight is approximately equal throughout the year. But in the northern or southern parts of the globe, as you know, we have a winter, we have a summer, and during the winter, there's not nearly as much sun exposure, not near as much energy reaching us from the sunlight. And so when we then start to go outdoors, towards summertime, we don't have any protection because we don't have the exposure that produces melanin. So our bodies have this thing called tanning. And as sun exposure increases, it stimulates our melanocytes, some cells that are in our skin, to produce increased amounts of melanin, which give us what we call the tan. And this pigmentation actually protects us to a large extent against sunlight's exposure and damage to the skin. Here's an article from June of this year published in Frontiers of Genetics. A very interesting study looking at the genes of vitamin D metabolism and their roles in the risk and prognosis of skin cancer. If you enjoy reading scientific articles, I would recommend this as one. It's recent, it's well done, and the handout would have a little larger image. And by the way, if you want a handout, let us know your email, and we can email you a PDF of the slides and a little bit larger than the picture here. But basically, the key one is the one on the left, showing the variety of ways that different genes in our body are involved in metabolism and the effect vitamin D has. So the bottom line is, in fact, I think it's on the next slide here. I've summarized it in text form. So vitamin D metabolism has significant influences on our human health. one of the ones that we first learned about and have been using for, I believe, over a century, is the vitamin D for rickets and for preventing basically skeletal or bone disorders. But we've learned more recently that vitamin D has so many different functions that it is involved in, from our immune system to fighting infection, absorbing nutrients. I mean, it's amazing, frankly, how many different ways it is involved. They point out in the article here that epidemiologic studies looking at the correlation or the association between serum vitamin D levels and cancer risk, and also genome-wide studies of the association of genes with certain outcomes indicate that, and also the third thing is the lab analysis of cancer models. Models, in other words, that have been developed as to how cancer works and what causes and so on. All of those things indicate that there are clinical benefits, however, to a higher level of vitamin D. There's difference of opinion that I find even among respected experts, but in general, I would say if a vitamin D level is around 50 nanograms, then that's probably a good and safe number. I know some who say that I respect that say they would prefer a person to maintain 70. The normal range is typically, normal healthy range is, most labs would say, is between 30 and 100. So 50 seems to be a good, safe place. But the details haven't all been worked out, and I suspect that it's not the same exact number for every person and every lifestyle. One thing that's important to note is, and they mention in this article, is that the clinical benefits of supplementation of vitamin D for cancer treatment is not really thoroughly investigated yet, and we can't really say with certainty what the benefits are and how they work. Nonetheless, I certainly, as a physician, support the idea of oral vitamin D supplementation for those who are below 30, and certainly anyone that's below 20. And I will have to say I've seen some remarkable things. One of the most amazing ones, I had a health guest, a lifestyle patient, who I think set the record for the lowest number I've ever seen, and I believe it was in the neighborhood of 6. And I thought that was extremely low. This person was eating a gluten-free, wheat-free diet because they had allergy that had developed to the point that they couldn't even enter a room where someone else had wheat without having a reaction. It wasn't a deadly reaction at that low of risk or that low exposure, but it was enough that they could tell and would leave the room or turn on the ventilation or something. And they came through our lifestyle immersion program. This was up in Michigan, Grand Rapids, Michigan. And I found this low vitamin D level and recommended some pretty stiff supplementation and try to get it up above 20 at least, and hopefully above 30. Well, they did very well. They had a number of improvements like most people go through the program, cholesterol, triglycerides, and so on, blood sugar, but not really much change in their allergy. And I have to admit, I prayed and I wondered about what we might have missed, that it didn't get significantly better. But about 3 months, 2 to 3 months later, I got a call from that couple, and they were just excited because the allergy had gone away, and this patient was now able to eat wheat, but not much less be exposed to a room that had wheat in it. And we had every reason to believe, after looking at the lab value for the vitamin D levels, which were now up in above 20, that vitamin D may have been the key thing that was causing this We'll never know for sure because we didn't have rigorous testing and et cetera. But nonetheless, that's the one thing that supplementation she was doing long term and seemed to. So that helped make me a believer in trying to maintain adequate vitamin D levels even with supplementation. But I do believe that it's best if you can get your level where it needs to be using sunlight and exposure to the sunlight. One interesting thing was noted in this article, and I had noticed this myself in my own practice in medicine, is that nutritionists are now becoming more common in oncology units that are working in the hospitals or large clinics, because the vitamin D metabolism does have some impact in cancer treatment success. And so we increasingly see nutrition as one of the treatment elements for treating cancer. So let's take a little bit of a deeper dive into what is sunlight, what does it consist of? And in reality, sunlight is a part. When I asked did a little survey at home asking family members, what do you think sunlight is? And basically, the answers I got were, I think, the same as most people. We think of sunlight as that's the visible light. That's when the sun's shining, you can see it. Brightens things up, lights things up. You can see shadows. If you can't see any shadows, and it's not particularly a bright spots, we don't think of it as sunlight. However, we know that sunlight is a part of solar radiation, that all of this is coming from the sun, which is essentially burning hydrogen. Well, that's not I shouldn't say that. It's not burning hydrogen, because burning usually means oxidation. It is literally turning hydrogen into energy, turning mass into energy. And I've forgotten the number, but I've seen experts' estimates of how long the sun, before it'll run out of hydrogen to burn, and it's a long time. I'm not the least bit worried about us running out. But it produces solar radiation, and it varies by its frequency. So it's quite a range. I've got a little chart here. Hopefully you can see. On the left side is where the energy level of that radiation is highest. Over towards the right, it's lower. On the left, it's high frequency, meaning as you can see in the drawing there, the wave length is quite a bit shorter. And then in the middle, approximately, they've actually shown us the colors, rainbow there, the color palette. Somewhere is just between 200 nanometers and 2,500. Closer to the 200 to 1,000 nanometer range, and that's where the colors are. And notice the note there at the bottom of that. It says 99.9% of solar energy is between these wavelengths. And so that's really, I would say, what most of us think of as sunlight. It's that part there that we can see. However, if you look, the chart shows that, the graph shows that then you have infrared is longer wavelength than the sunlight, or the visible range, and then down lower yet microwaves, and lower yet radio waves. And so let's talk about ultraviolet. I'll just go back over here and look. So ultraviolet, see, that's just to the left of the visible range that's showing the rainbow colors. So we're going to talk about that because this is the wavelength that in particular is associated with risk of skin cancer. And there's 3 types of ultraviolet radiation, and each has a higher frequency and more energy. So UVA, then UVB, and ultraviolet C. So they consider them A, B, C. Let's just look at them. The highest energy, which would mean the highest frequency and the shortest wavelength, are UVC. But the energy is so high that this rays, wavelength, the solar rays, are blocked by the ozone layer. They and seldom reach us here on the ground. So we really don't have much impact from that. That is also, however, helps us understand why there's concern about the destruction of the ozone layer. Because if we did lose our ozone layer over the planet, we'd certainly be exposed to considerably more dangerous ultraviolet rays, the C. Next, I'm going to jump to the UVA. This is the rays that have the longest wavelength and the least energy in the rays, and they really only affect the superficial part of our skin. In fact, what the book I was reading on this was saying this is essentially what causes most of the surface skin aging that takes place. And finally, looking at the ultraviolet B, the UVB rays, they have enough energy to penetrate deeper layers of the skin, but not enough. They don't have enough energy to be blocked by the ozone layer. So these are really the ones that can cause sunburn and contribute to increased risk of cancer. These are also the ones that cause tanning, although the UVA can also have some effect on causing the release of melanin and the tanning effect. But the ultraviolet B are the ones that really particularly cause this. So, as I already mentioned a little bit, these cells called melanocytes in our epidermis, our skin, they respond to the ultraviolet radiation by forming more melanin. This is a protein that's a pigment, basically. It darkens our skin. It's interesting. There are some conditions that cause the loss of melanocytes, and it's interesting to see a person with that condition who's been in the sun and has gotten tan. They can often have these little small spots that are they're not tanned, where they missing melanocyte. So they're not, the melanocytes are not right up against each other like most other cells. You can actually see space between them. Anyway, so the trick here is to get gradually exposed to the sunlight so that we get a tan and don't get a sunburn. And we can get the benefits of the vitamin D exposure without the risk or concern about skin cancer. Now, it is important to keep in mind that even when you don't see sunlight, the visible rays from the sun being very strong because it's blocked by the clouds, we tend to think, well, there's no sunshine, no danger. But the reality is we can still get a sunburn from the ultraviolet, which is not blocked. Most of it is not blocked by the clouds. I do want to emphasize and acknowledge that the skin cancer melanoma is a very serious and dangerous condition, and we do want to avoid it, and we do want to, if we think that we are having some patches anywhere on our body, that there's basically like a multicolored patch, that could be melanoma. I know this is a gross or not a very detailed and realistic example, but it's a little bit like a calico. It has a variety of colors. It's not just one like brown or black. It'll have a variety of variations typically in melanoma. Anyway, don't take chances. Avoid sunburn. And if you have concern about something that might be cancerous, have it checked by an expert. So, I don't know how many of you might be old enough to remember when moms hung their laundry on the clothesline to dry. But I remember when I was a kid that my mom was doing that. And I can remember with fondness how wonderful it was to go to bed in a sheet and a pillowcase that had been on the line and had been in the sun. I don't know, I'm sure it didn't, I don't know what sunlight smells like, but I've gotten this impression that it smelled like sunlight because I knew that's what made that wonderful smell. So I say it seemed like it smelled like the sun, but I suspect sunlight has no smell. And it's interesting to, I don't know how many moms that were doing this realized it, but it's actually a wonderful way to safely sanitize the linen and the clothing, because the damage that we see from ultraviolet radiation in our own skin is also damaging to other organisms, microorganisms, germs, and even viruses. So it's actually a very healthy habit or practice to hang our laundry out outdoors on a sunny day. I believe there's also, I will acknowledge this, I do believe it may shorten the life of some of the fabric, some of the clothing. I'm not sure how it affects polyester, which we have quite a bit of today. I know that with cotton, it does tend to accelerate or shorten the life, let's say it that way, the useful life of the clothing. But I think personally that it's in my family, most of those clothes were worn out before they were destroyed by hanging them in the sun. So basically what we're saying here is that sunshine is one of nature's most effective and affordable antiseptic sterilizers, and it's absolutely free. So let's talk about another one that we don't call tuberculosis consumption much anymore, but nonetheless we do have tuberculosis even in America. And tuberculosis is a persistent lung infection. It used to slowly consume a person's, the person that got tuberculosis 150 years ago, they would essentially start deteriorating. They would get thin. It was like a consuming disease. And they were cared for in places called sanatoriums. And one of the key things that, if you look this up, sanatoriums were, you had lots of windows, lots of ways to expose the patients to sunlight. And it was very helpful. It did not, and I'm not suggesting that it was as effective as the antibiotics that we're privileged and blessed to have now. However, I will mention something. If you stay up on the literature, we are seeing the antibiotics that we've been using for tuberculosis losing their effectiveness because tuberculosis is gaining resistance to the antibiotics we have. And so if you know anyone that has tuberculosis, hopefully you do not, but if you do, it's well worth letting them know about the benefit of sunshine and sunlight to help control it and minimize spreading. Because the tuberculosis cannot develop resistance to sunlight. That's the way it works. The ultraviolet rays actually can destroy the genome, the DNA in the tuberculosis bacteria. And I've got something to say a little bit later that some of you might be thinking, well, how does it do that if the bacterium is in your body? How is the sunlight going to have any effect on it? I'll show you something about that in just a minute. So, like I say, it's a simple thing, and I certainly shared it with the patients that I've treated. I haven't really treated tuberculosis much in my lifestyle medicine practice, but when I was in medical school and doing residency, I certainly was treating tuberculosis, and even though it wasn't on the treatment plan in most cases, I tried to tell people about the benefit of sunlight. So let me ask you let's ask ourselves a simple question. What is sunlight? And I want to show you something very interesting. I was reading an article, I'm sorry I didn't put the citation on the slide here, but I was reading an article just recently where astrophysicists recently discovered that our existing theories about how the sun works are incorrect or at least incomplete. And how do they know this? Because they've developed some newer, better ways of measuring solar radiation, and these newer measures reveal that the sun's gamma rays, now this is some of the rays at the highest frequency, highest energy over on the left of that chart I showed you. The gamma rays reveal it produces 7 times as much gamma radiation as the current theories about where gamma rays come from would explain. And so this is by the way, I've got a little note there on the slide, but this is based on the current theory was that the gamma rays come from cosmic rays that bounce off of the sun's powerful magnetic field. You know, the sun is has an unbelievably high gravitational pull. As you know, gravity is a product of mass, so we have the Earth has gravity. If the Earth was the size of Jupiter, we would all weigh multiple times as much as we do. If you weigh 100 pounds on the Earth, you might effectively weigh 300 or 400 pounds or more on Jupiter, which is one of the larger planets. On the sun, it would be, I don't know what the number would be, but it would be beyond comprehension. And so the point I'm making is that there's a magnetic field and a gravitational field surrounding the sun that's very stronger and unlike what surrounds the Earth. And yet even the Earth, you may be aware of this, what are those lights that we see in the sky, typically at the poles? Blinking. Oh yeah, aurora borealis. Thank you. That's exactly what I'm talking about. And that's produced by interaction with the Earth's magnetic field and some of the solar radiation, the flares produced that come to our planet, and the magnetic field interacts and causes these interesting lights. But another thing that they were talking about in this article that was interesting to show how little even the experts understand about sunlight and the radiation from the sun is that there is a blank spot or a missing frequency band in the gamma radiation. In general, the spectrum of radiation from the sun, solar radiation, is a continuous band, but there's a missing frequency in the gamma radiation of the sun, which the scientists cannot explain. I'm sure once we at some point figure that out, it'll all make good sense. But right now, we don't even understand why that happened or how it could happen. So the way I look at this is another reason to acknowledge our amazing Creator. You know, in Genesis 1, verses 14 to 19, it talks about the creation and how God spoke the sun into existence on the 4th day of creation. And there's many, many things that we do not understand. I would even say we cannot understand about God's creation. And I think it's good to apply ourselves to understand as much as we can. I'm definitely an advocate of good, solid science and inquiry, but we have to acknowledge that we are finite and the Creator is infinite, and we're not going to understand everything that God did unless He chooses to inform us about it. So what are some other things affected by sunlight? You might find this quite interesting. What else can sunlight do? So my wife and I have lived in a motorhome all year for a few years, but recently part of the year only. But anyway, if you live in an RV, spend a lot of time in it, you have to protect your tires when you are parked wherever. You can't, it's not very practical to do this while traveling on the road, although I have to admit, if I spent all of my time traveling, I believe I would find a way to put some fender skirts, because sun actually destroys the rubber on the tires and causes them over a period of a few years to start cracking. And we had an experience actually where we had a flat tire because it was one of the tires that was on the outside and had been exposed to a lot more sunlight, and made me a lot more careful about covering them. By the way, a little tidbit here. You may not know this, but there's a number that is cast into every tire that's a 4-digit number, and it is the month of the year and then the 2-digit year of manufacture. So you can look at a tire commercial tire for sure, and it will tell you which week of the year and what year that it was made, so you can tell how old it is. Many of these fleets, they actually change the tires based on time rather than on apparent wear or whatever. Okay, but something else more likely that the average person would know about is if you have plastic on your houses, like if you have a plastic shutters, or if you have plastic trim around the screen door or something, this will deteriorate over time and becomes brittle. It actually will pulverize. I've seen that in some very old plastic. It's been where on the south side of the home, for example. So this is damage from the higher energy radiation. There's also another, this is what we call ionizing rays. These are the rays that are above visible light. So you've got the ultraviolet we talked about and the gamma radiation. These are solar radiation whose energy level is sufficient to damage the cell itself, and especially the DNA that can be damaged. That's why we have in each cell has a correction mechanism. I don't know if you're aware of this, but every cell in our body, with the exception of red blood cells, which don't have a nucleus, every cell with a nucleus has a protective mechanism that is constantly at work, reading the genome and looking for mistakes that have been caused by ionizing radiation or other things. And that's why it's so nice that we have two strands. This protective mechanism wouldn't work if the DNA only had one strand, but as you know, it's sort of a twisted or a spiral-shaped two-stranded genome, and that's the way that these mechanisms can tell when there's a mismatch that doesn't make sense. So, those rays not only damage the body but other things. Let me ask you a question that probably most of you would not think about is be associated with sunlight, but I'm going to show you that it is. If I were to ask you, what is the one gene in all the DNA on Earth that's the most important for life, what might you say? Now, there would be multiple correct answers here, but I think you'll be surprised at the one that I chose. And without this gene that I'm going to show you here in a moment, life would be impossible on the Earth. And that's the gene for chlorophyll, because this is the one gene that allows plants to, I wonder what happened to that one. Anyway, it's the one gene that allows plants to capture the energy in the sunlight and store it in a way that animal life can then burn or oxidize to capture the energy. And I'm just showing the photosynthesis uses sunlight to turn water and carbon dioxide into carbohydrates and oxygen, and then the living animal kingdom, all living things oxidize or burn carbohydrates to produce energy and carbon dioxide and water. So, but you could say, well, hemoglobin we wouldn't be here without hemoglobin. That's true, but the plants would be here without it. But if the plants didn't have chlorophyll, they wouldn't be here, and we wouldn't be here either. So, all right, this is a question I have to touch on before we finish, and that is how much sunlight is best, and how much sunlight should we get a day? I already mentioned this a little bit earlier, but the answer is there's no simple or single answer for everyone. We have to take into account that there's lots of different things that alter the effect of sunshine. For example, sunshine in the morning has much less strength. It's when it's directly overhead that we have more, the rays feel hotter. I'm sure you've noticed that. And the reason is that when the sun is at sunrise or sunset, the rays are going through a lot more of our atmosphere. So they're losing some of their energy, as they come and hit us. But when they're directly overhead, that's when it has less. And often this is quite noticeable. So in the morning is a good time to exercise when it's cooler and less sunshine, less energy in the sunshine that's hitting us. Most of the experts that I looked at a number of different sources, and probably 10 to 15 minutes of non-midday sunlight, 3 to 4 days a week, would be best to begin. And then it can gradually increase as your skin tans, as the melanocytes produce melanin to protect you. And I again mentioned that there are people who their profession has them spending all day in the sun with no ill effect beyond what those of us who are in the sun less have. Now, one thing to keep in mind is that the top of our nose, it sticks out there a little bit, and top of our ears are areas that are definitely get more exposure than other parts of our body. And so it's probably good if you spend a good bit of time outdoors to wear a hat that can shade both of those areas. All right, 15 minutes of exposure. This is an estimate. 15 minutes of exposure to our arms, our face, lower legs. So I could wear shorts, expose my lower legs, is plenty for good health. There are those who actually think that exposure of the arms and face alone for 15 minutes is adequate. I couldn't find, what should I say, convincing consensus about that. But certainly about a third, we expose about a third of our body surface to sunlight for 15 minutes, it's adequate for the production of the vitamin D that we would need. Oh, I'm sorry, I went too fast. There's a little bit more on that slide I want you to see. So I've already talked about sun rays are stronger around midday. So we want to avoid sunburn. It's avoidable. It should be, we should do, it's just nonsensical to get a sunburn. And I'm going to tell you about a case where I overdid it. I got a sunburn it was almost beyond what I could handle pain-wise. I'll tell you about that in a minute. So sunblock can be helpful, but it's really better to limit the amount of sun exposure and sunburn by not being in the sun especially when it's at its strongest. It's better. And one of the reasons is that the majority of sunblock actually has fat, has oil in it, and this is absorbed into our body. We don't need that extra oil or fat, and there are other things in some of them that would be, I think, if you can avoid it, it's better. It's like Stacy was saying during her cooking demonstration and meal prep, that she was talking about the dyed black olives having the dye. Why do we need to eat that? We don't need to. I agree with her. I like the ones that are either naturally black, or I actually like the ones that are more brown type, talking about olives. So wear clothing that covers your body if you have to be in the sun. One thing is, I would point this out. If you garden and you work outdoors for 30 minutes basically every day, all year long, you don't need to worry about sunburn because your body will naturally tan as the sun starts getting further, in our northern hemisphere, as it gets further up in the sky from being down towards the south. And as it gets, as the planet becomes through spring and into summer, we will naturally have adequate tan on the exposed portion that we don't really have to worry about a sunburn. Another thing that's really beneficial, and it's been measured, is the effect of sunlight from sunbathing. And people testify and measure, sociological studies indicate that there's a genuine relaxing effect in our body of doing some sunbathing. I know that it's recommended for those who are sick or are recovering from infection or other conditions. Even pain is improved, generally lessened by sunbathing. But it is important to be careful not to overdo it, and especially don't fall asleep while you're sunbathing unless you're covered. And of course, if you were covered, we wouldn't call it sunbathing. And I once made this mistake. I had never spent any time at a Florida summer beach, but I was there. Someone was gracious enough to pay my way, and I went to Florida, and I believe it was June or July, and I only spent like an hour and a half out there sunbathing, but I knew within 24 hours that I had really made a mistake, because it hurt just to take a shower. And if you've ever been terribly sunburned, you know exactly what I'm talking about. But eventually, I think it was 3 or 4 days, the outer layer of my skin all flaked off, and I began to recover. But anyway, so I really am personally acquainted with sunburn, and that was a mistake. But I haven't been sunburned much at all. But that one time made up for most of it, I guess. So let me end with this little thing that Dr. Hess brought to my attention. I really enjoyed this article he pointed out to me. So the heading on the slide says, "Sunlight passes through the body?" ? And it's so interesting. Of course, visible sunlight does not pass through the body. How do I know that? Well, we cast the shadow. And so the sunlight is not going through my body. But the longer wavelengths of the solar radiation, that would be the ones that were over on the right-hand side of that graph, that they have longer wavelength, lower energy level. They've been found that they do indeed pass through the human body. They've actually got devices, I wouldn't call them a camera, but they monitor the long wavelength infrared and longer wavelength radiation, and they have done studies showing that if you have a person with their back to the sun and you put this device in front of their chest, you can actually measure the amount of that radiation that's going through their body. And but this is the low energy wavelength, and it actually is not, as far as we can tell so far, there's no harm. It's actually beneficial. And that was what was so remarkable about this article, I felt. And so it goes deeply into the tissue and will literally go through, some of it will go all the way through. And what they discovered in this study was that this long wavelength radiation has a beneficial effect on our bodies, and in particular on the mitochondria. And that's an amazing thought. If you understand, the mitochondria are like the little power cells in our power units in our cells, and they make the ATP, adenosine triphosphate, which is the currency, if you will, the energy currency used in all of our cells to do wherever it takes energy to do something, to cause something to happen, the body cells are using ATP. And the mitochondria are the mechanisms, the organelles in our cells that make the ATP. So they found that this translated to improved performance, particularly in the central nervous system. I don't know about you, but I'd love to have improved performance in my central nervous system, and including the visual system. But to me, I thought this was the most impressive part of it. They said that the study highlighted the potentially important therapeutic value of sunlight whose longer wavelengths can reach key organs even through the clothing. These long wavelength waves, solar radiation, passes right through clothing. It's not like visible light that's stopped by it. And it's not like UV rays, which are also largely stopped by the clothing. And it promotes mitochondrial function, improves it. And I love this last phrase they said, which could help to counteract the decline that occurs with age and disease. So, my question is there more harm from fearing sunlight than we gain by avoiding it? And I think that that's true for most of us. All mammals are designed to be in the sun. However, we're designed to be in the sun on a regular, consistent basis so that we don't have the danger of sunburn. And I believe, now I don't have, this next couple of statements are not based on a specific study, but it's based on experience and reading, that if we would adopt Eden's lifestyle, so that we had a diet, hydration, sleep, trust in God, etc., that were present in Adam and Eve before their sin, sunlight would be fully health promoting, and they wouldn't have optimal health without the sunlight. So, combine it with SON light, the Son of God, and it can extend our longevity to eternity. So, I don't know if we have any questions, but I'd be happy to take them and try to provide an answer. Otherwise, I've put my email there in case you would like to get a copy of the handout or share anything else. If you have any articles that you're aware of that you think would have been good to include that I didn't, I'd be happy to get a copy of it, or just a citation. So, any questions? All right, well, thank you very much, and I wish you a good evening.